Chapter 8, Unit 1. Learning from the Past. Section B2. Listen to the dialogue between Susan and Dara.
Would you like to attend Pajumben in my village, Susan?
Thank you, Dara. Is that when you go to the pagoda to pay your respects to your ancestors?
Yes, that's right. I want to pay my respects to my ancestors, and especially to those who died during the Khmer Rouge regime. I believe you worked in the border camps during that time.
Yes, that's right.
So you must have known what was happening.
Yes, many people told me about their experiences. I remember trying to calm their feelings. It was difficult, but if I were them, how would I have felt? Sometimes I found their stories really hard to bear.
When I look back, it's like remembering a nightmare.
If I were you, I think I would try to forget about it.
Yes, but if we forget, it's like closing our eyes while a dangerous animal creeps up on us. We must know about the past in order to learn from it. Otherwise, more people will be killed, and our society, culture and traditions will be turned upside down again. So I would rather remember the past than forget or ignore it.
Chapter 8, Unit 2, The Way of Peace. Section A2. Listen to the dialogue.
I've been reading about the peace marches. What were they for?
Weren't they for peace?
Yes, but why were they necessary, do you think?
To stop violence in society?
Right. So, where does the violence come from?
From people. People get angry.
Then what happens?
When people get angry, they can't always control themselves. Then there's violence. But that's natural.
Yes, but that doesn't mean it's good, does it? Doesn't Buddhism teach us to control ourselves?
Yes, but not everyone follows Buddhism. The Khmer Rouge didn't.
Well, I'd rather follow Buddhism than the Khmer Rouge. Theirs was a regime of fear and violence.
That's right. Our country's been through a crisis, indeed a nightmare. But now we should be positive, because we have the opportunity to recover, to improve our society and bring back peace.
Chapter 9, Unit 2, A Fire in Battambang. Section B2. Listen to the morning news on the radio.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 8 o'clock news. Last night, there was a terrible fire in Battambang. It started at about 7:30 in the evening and lasted until early morning. More than 100 houses were completely destroyed and many people were badly hurt, though fortunately nobody has died. People said that the fire engines didn't arrive until many houses had already been destroyed. The senior officer in charge of the operation explained that it was difficult for the fire engines, with their crews and equipment, to reach the location. The way to the fire was blocked and was so narrow that they could hardly reach the fire without causing a collision. Eventually they did reach the houses, however, and were able to start pumping up the water and spraying it on the fire. Soon afterwards, it began to rain, which also helped. The rain was continuous through the night, but it still took many hours to put out the fire completely. Until now, it is not known who was responsible for the fire, but the police are continuing their investigation. The senior officer suggested that it might be better if people blamed themselves for not being more careful in their homes, rather than blaming his crew members for not being punctual, because, as he said, protection is better than cure. Chapter 9, Unit 3, A Fire at Home. Section A2. Listen to the dialogue.
Oh, Dr. Chanda, my son's been badly burned.
Let me see. Oh dear, it's nasty. The burn must be dressed immediately. How did it happen?
I was cutting vegetables when I heard a scream. I rushed into the kitchen, and there was my son. He had knocked hot water over himself. He's only just stopped screaming.
How old is he?
5. I know children of his age must be looked after carefully, but his cousin was in the bathroom when it happened.
Is his cousin an adult?
No, she's only 10. It's just a temporary arrangement, you see. Usually an older relative looks after him, but she had to go to a wedding.
Unfortunately, it happens all the time. We simply can't trust in luck. Here you are. I've dressed the burn, but your son must be brought into hospital tomorrow morning. Can you manage that?
Oh, yes. Thank you very much. I'm sorry to make you work at home on a Sunday, Dr. Chanda, but I felt it was an emergency.
That's all right. Doctors often have to sacrifice their free time. It's part of their job.
Chapter 10, Unit 1, As If by Magic. Section A3, Listen to the story.
Do you remember reading about Ted's favourite island, Corsica, in English for Cambodia, Book 5? You may also remember that Peter, Ted's nephew, used to go to France to pick grapes during his holidays from university. Although he's been to France, he's never been to Corsica, although Uncle Ted has often told him about it. Now he's thinking of going there during his summer holidays. If he had the opportunity to earn enough money, he could fly straight there, and he wouldn't have to spend all his time picking grapes. Peter was reading the newspaper when he saw an interesting advertisement. It had been put in the newspaper by a large travel company, and was an invitation to write about one of 10 holiday destinations. As if by magic, Corsica was one of them. Applicants were invited to write to the company's director, inform her about the place that they preferred, which aspects they would like to write about, and explain why they should be chosen. 30 applicants would be invited for interview, out of which 10 would be selected. Successful applicants would be given a free return air ticket and $100 for each article of roughly 1,000 words written and published in the company's travel magazine, Adventure Holidays. Peter immediately phoned Uncle Ted, told him about the advertisement, and arranged to discuss it with him that evening. He then went round to his local library and found a couple of books about Corsica. As he walked round to Ted's house later that evening, he felt nervous as he wondered how he was going to write the letter to the company director. He knew that he couldn't write the letter as if he was writing to his sister Lucy or to a friend. That wouldn't be appropriate. This letter would have to be an official one, but previously Peter had hardly written any formal letters and didn't have much confidence in his ability to write one now. It certainly wouldn't be easy, especially as he would be competing against many others. Fortunately, however, he had his capable Uncle Ted and Aunt Mary to help him.
Chapter 11, Unit 1, A Visitor from New Zealand. Section A3, Listen to the story and dialogue. Last weekend, Dr. Sokchenda and her elder sister Mora, who lives in Wellington, New Zealand, visited Monica in Phnom Penh.
What's New Zealand like, Mora?
Oh, it's very nice, and Wellington's very attractive city because although it's very developed, it's not too big, and the people there are very friendly.
How did you come to live abroad?
During the Khmer Rouge regime, I managed to escape to the Thai border. As I was a refugee there, I was given the opportunity to go to live in New Zealand.
So you've lived there for quite a long time.
Oh, yes, ever since 1976.
And do you visit Cambodia quite often?
No, this is my first time. Since I've been busy, first of all studying, then working and bringing up my family, I haven't been able to visit before this.
Mora's also been helping me to study medicine, and now she's helping me collect funds for our hospital. How wonderful! How long will you stay here, Mora?
Just a month, because I have to return to my family and job in Wellington. When I retire, I hope I'll be able to visit Cambodia more regularly.
Chapter 12, Unit 1, How History is Born. Section B2, Listen to How History is Born.
Nobody is sure about how different peoples moved through what is now Cambodia in very early times. Consequently, we don't know for certain how long people have occupied Cambodia, where they came from, or what language they spoke. What we do know, however, is that by the 5th century, people in this region were already strongly influenced by Hinduism and Buddhism. We know this from early Sanskrit writing and the Khmer that developed from it. It is not surprising, therefore, that the main character in a story about how the state of Cambodia was born is a Hindu priest. His name was Kaundinya, and when he came to a region covered in water, he was met by a princess. After he had given gifts to the princess, her father, who was a water snake, or Naga, decided to drink up the water that covered his land so that he could give it to Kaundinya. The story tells us not only about how the country, now called Cambodia, was influenced from the west, but that early permanent residents irrigated their land so as to cultivate it. Although Kaundinya, Cambodia's first king, came from the west, the earliest writing about Cambodia that we know about comes from China. Chinese writers not only wrote about Kaundinya, but also about a country called Funan, the centre of which some people believe is in the present-day province of Prey Veng. These stories, however, are not history and often conflict with each other, although they do also contain some truth. In the future, we may be able to learn more about our past. Don't forget that Angkor, which now has an international reputation, lay abandoned and hidden for many centuries in the jungle. Since Angkor was reclaimed, however, we have begun to realize that history may lie beneath our feet. What at first appears to be just an old stone we have dug up is discovered to be something precious. Precious, not because it can be sold for a lot of money as an example of fine art, but because it provides important information about our past. Through such contributions to our knowledge and through modern scientific investigation, the past continues to rise to the surface and thus becomes part of our heritage and history. Chapter 12, Unit 2, Angkor. Section A2. Listen to the dialogue.
When did Angkor begin, Dad?
We can say it began in 802. That was the year when Jayavarman II became a god king, or, to use the Sanskrit word, Devaraja, in a Hindu ceremony. After moving around the country, he eventually chose the Angkor region for his capital city.
Why did he choose that region?
Because of its central location near the Great Lake, and so as to take advantage of the water resources there to cultivate rice.
The access to water was really important?
Yes, and its control through complex irrigation systems became essential to the economy of Angkor as it became more and more powerful.
If it became so powerful, why did it collapse?
After Jayavarman VII, the irrigation systems, which they depended on, gradually began to fail. Also, Angkor was threatened by enemies. As early as 1177, for example, Angkor was attacked by the Jam. Though they were defeated, and under Jayavarman VII, it became more powerful than ever. After that, however, Angkor slowly grew weaker until its final collapse in 1431, when it was attacked and defeated by the Siamese. Consequently, in about 1440, Angkor was abandoned, and, in order to find a safer place, the king withdrew from the region and moved south to what is now Phnom Penh.
Chapter 13, Unit 2, In London with Nelson. Section A3. Listen to the story.
Aunt May didn't feel at home in London when she first arrived there in the middle of winter. After the lovely warm climate of Montserrat, she found the cold weather terrible. In Montserrat, stories about England's snowy winters had sounded exciting, but when she actually experienced one, she just wanted to escape. As far as Aunt May was concerned, there was nothing romantic about snow, and she was grateful that in London she rarely saw it. Nelson, her son, had been born in London. We first met in my favourite Indian restaurant, where he was sitting at a table beside mine. Like his mother, he was very friendly, and we got talking, though I didn't realise then that Aunt May was his mother. As soon as he'd left school, he'd also left home, because he wanted to be independent. But he visited his mother regularly, and that was how I discovered that she and my landlady were the same person. Nelson knew London like the back of his hand, and during my first few months he enjoyed showing me around from the top of a red London bus. He lived on his own in a large room above an antique shop on the number 73 bus route. To get to his room, you had to go through the shop, past antique furniture, pictures, statues, books, and other interesting objects. Nelson's room, however, was almost empty because he needed space. The only piece of furniture in it was an enormous bed. We sat on it when he showed me a book of old photographs of London that his landlord had given him. Looking through it, you could see how fast London had changed. Old buildings came down as quickly as modern ones went up. Where buses ran, there used to be trams. The trams in Amsterdam are very efficient, Nelson said. They should have kept them here. In fact, I've heard they might be brought back. There are one or two places where you can still see the tram tracks. Nelson, who was studying to be an architect, knew a lot about London, and he didn't like all the changes that were taking place. In the evenings, we used to discuss recent developments as we travelled to Nelson's favourite pub or club, or to a party. "Just look at those cheap rubbish," he'd say, pointing to a particularly ugly new building. "Don't people realise that buildings need imagination, colour, shape and style? As long as they're happy with things like that, architects like me will be wasted. Believe you me, development and progress aren't always the same thing."
Chapter 13, Unit 3, The Old and the New. Section A3. Listen to the dialogue.
Look at this, Nelson. Isn't it beautiful?
Oh, yes. It's a great contribution to contemporary architecture. It both fits in with its environment and adds to it.
I suppose that's what you're trying to do in the competition.
What competition, Nelson? I thought you weren't competitive.
I'm not. But the design of a theatre on the Thames has interesting possibilities and rather appeals to me.
Is it going to be like the Sydney Opera House?
Well, I want it to reflect and be reflected in the water in the same way. But can the location be compared?
Both Sydney Harbour and the Thames are famous locations. The main difference is their history.
I agree with you there, Andrew. Sometimes I feel London's got too much history, too many historical buildings. Even some of the shops are old.
Like Mr. Pink's antique shop.
Yes, even the things inside are old there.
Well, my theatre's going to take London into the future, Mum, like those ships that once sailed down the Thames to explore and open up new worlds. I'm aiming to make the future part of London's history.